Twizeyimana Felicien, a deaf young man, was accused and arrested for defiling two girls. Felicien, who had no knowledge of sign language and no opportunity to go to school, found himself in court with no idea what was going on. Because he could neither hear nor speak to the accusation and had no legal counsel, he allegedly admitted to defiling the girls. This plea led the Gasabo Intermediate Court to sentence him to 12 years in prison instead of life imprisonment. Upon his arrival in prison, Felicien sought help from fellow inmates to appeal the Intermediate Court's decision.
Twizeyimana
Felicien came here to help us look after cows, but out of nowhere, we heard the story that he had defiled two children. We were shocked and hurt because in his nature, he was a gentle child who kept to himself. He always came home early. It never got dark while he was outside. After his arrest, we were really confused and hurt as to where it came from.
Aho nabaga banzanye ahangaha nemve mu cyaro banzana aha ntangira akazi ko gukata ibyatsi.
I was brought here from the village to help out with weeding, watering and looking after cows. One day while I was finishing up with work, police officers came towards me and said, "This one." They spoke to me, but I did not understand them. They gestured for me to pack up my things, so I wrapped up the grass quickly and brought it here. They then told me to wash my hands, and I did. Then one police officer who looked like the leader came and they took me somewhere far where they locked me up. The car that had brought me to prison took me to a hospital, then they brought me back to prison.
Ariko imodoka yanzanye mbona imodoka injyanye ahandi kwa muganga ahantu kure. Noneho tuvayo ku modoka turongera turagaruka bangarukana ahantu bamfunze.
Imbogamizi zahabonetse nuko we ntiyabashaga.
The biggest challenge was that he was unable to speak or hear, and because he never had the opportunity to go to school, he did not learn sign language, which is why his case was delayed. He needed someone to teach him sign language so he may be able to defend himself.
Kugira ngo azabashe kwiburanira.
Hari umugabo wambaye ikanzu hari kera.
There was a man wearing a dress who had a computer and was typing on it. I pleaded for mercy even though I did not know what was going on. I was then taken back to prison. I would see people talking, but I did not understand what they were saying. They asked if I couldn't hear or speak, and I asked them to help me. When I was taken back to my cell, fellow inmates helped me write something, and then I went back to court.
Ku rwego rwa mbere mu rukiko rwisumbuye rwa Gasabo yari yarakatiwe igihano cy'igifungo.
In the first instance, in the Intermediate Court of Gasabo, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison. But after we received his dossier, on appeal, we found that there were so many flaws in the ruling of his case. Twizeyimana Felicien was a man born with hearing and speech impairment, so it was difficult to see what the court based their decision on when he couldn't defend himself or understand what was going on, and the court couldn't understand him either. It was clear that he was deprived of his rights, which is entitled to under the law like everyone else.
Ukareba mu by'ukuri icyo bashingiyeho bamuha icyo gihano hari uburenganzira bwe atabashije guhabwa kandi abugenerwa n'amategeko nk'abandi bose.
Mu butabera barampamagaye bansaba ko ngewe najyayo nk'umuntu nyine ufite ubumuga bwo kutumvura kutavuga hari muri Gasabo barampamagara nje kureba mugenzi wanjye noneho barambaza niba ngewe nshobora kumva mugenzi wanjye kurusha umusemuzi bakumvikana.
The court called me to attend the hearing as a fellow deaf person in Gasabo. They wanted to see if I could understand him better than the interpreter. However, when I arrived and met Twizeyimana, I really couldn't understand him. So I explained to the court that I could interpret things as I saw them. However, I couldn't make a concrete interpretation of what he was trying to communicate. So I suggested that it would be best that he be taught sign language for at least 3 months. Then I asked the court for them to bring him here at our offices so he can learn sign language. However, since he was imprisoned, it was not possible for them to always bring him here to our office to teach him sign language. So it became a problem. Fortunately, we came across the Legal Aid Forum and they agreed to help us pay for a teacher to teach him from prison.
amahirwe tuza guhura na Legal Aid Forum bo bemera kudufasha gutanga kwishyura umwarimu uzajya ujya kumwigisha amezi 3 icyo gihe aho yari afungiye muri gereza.
I taught him for 3 months, 2 hours a day from 10 a.m. to noon. When we first started, I'd say it wasn't easy. In fact, it was very difficult. For example, I would say good morning to explain to him the morning and he would understand because it was during daytime. But I had to use sign language to explain to him the evening. We spent a week learning the difference between morning, noon, and evening. So I wouldn't say he was a quick learner. Even when he finished, he had learned just the basics. Since he didn't know how to read or write, a lot of what we learned was through using pictures. I would show him a photo of an object and then he would learn the sign language for it.
aho nari mfungiye hari abantu bambaraga akagofero n'umuntu nawe wari umuyobozi wadufashaga kuko iyo twamaraga kwiga.
After my study session with the teacher, the prison warden would help me revise what I had learned and teach me numbers. The following morning, a guard would take me back to the room where I studied with my teacher. Once the day was over, I would be brought back to my cell, but I would have my notebook with me, which had all I had learned in it.
Umunsi wo kwiga nkongera ngaruka nkiga, umunsi wanjye kwiga nkongera nkataha, nabo twabanaga aho ngaho nta kibazo, ariko nari mfite ikaye yanditse.
The judge accepted to delay the case until the guy is taught the sign language so that he can be given the opportunity to defend himself before the judge. Twizeyimana is trained on sign language so that he can be given the opportunity to interact with the lawyer through interpretation, of course, which was done. The course took him about 3 months and a half. And you had also to work with the prison authority, the Rwanda Correctional Service, to allow the trainer to meet him in prison because he had been sentenced to over 10 years. And so he was trained on how to use sign language. And then after we are convinced, both the prosecution, the Rwanda Correctional Service, that now he understands the language, we assigned the lawyer, and then he appeared before the judge, I think a couple of months ago.
Nyuma yuko amezi 3 ashize twasubiye imbere y'urukiko ariko ugasanga Twizeyimana Felicien yaratarabifata.
After 3 months, we went back to court but found that Twizeyimana Felicien wasn't fluent enough in sign language to speak to the allegations against him. After a period of time, I don't remember exactly how long it was, we went back to court and COVID-19 interfered, so the hearing was cancelled. The hearing was later held virtual in order to adhere to COVID-19 preventative measures. Speaking to him, we could see that he had learned a lot and his interpreter was able to understand him 100%. During the hearing, we had an interpreter who knew sign language, which allowed us to understand what Felicien was communicating and allowed our client to understand us too. This enabled us to successfully ensure his defense.
Byatumaga natwe ibyo tuvuga tubyumva n'ibyo uwo twunganiraga avuga tukabisemurirwa. Icyo gihe rero bituma tubasha kwasira neza defense ye muri urwo rubanza.
Rwose kuba mwaramubaye hafi ngiye n'icyifuzo nashyize imbere y'Imana ndavuga ngo Mana.
The Legal Aid Forum was truly there for him. I had asked God to be merciful to me and see that he's released. So thank you for helping him. Even though I didn't get to know you, the one that I got to know was the interpreter who I used to meet regularly. I am thankful to God for what you did for him, and may the Lord in heaven bless you and reward you for your giving heart.
uwo mutima w'urukundo muzawuhorane kandi Imana izabibahembera.
icyo ntashaka ni ko mfite ubumuga ndumva ntashaka kongera kujya kuba umushumba kuragira inka no gutema.
I don't want to go back to watering, cutting grass, and looking after cows just because I live with a disability. Instead, I want to learn how to sew. I saw people with disabilities sewing, cutting clothes, and I think it is good. I loved it and I want to do it so that I can make money and send it to my mother. That's what I want.
N'ibindi byo gutera ipasi bakadoda imyenda ngewe ndabikunda ndabishaka. Noneho kubera ko nzajya mbona amafaranga hanyuma nshyire mama wanjye ahantu ibintu nibyo nshaka. Abantu bararenganwa barakandamizwa ugasanga umuntu ararenganye.
People are wronged and oppressed. You find that an innocent person is imprisoned, his or her rights have been violated, and they are unable to defend themselves, which is a violation of their right to have access to justice.
I ask that the Legal Aid Forum and other organizations like it that help people to include in their advocacy efforts people with disabilities that are incarcerated.
twabonye ko nubwo amategeko yacu mu by'ukuri akoze neza ariko hari ikigo.
We have found that even though we have good laws, more can be done in order to avoid cases similar to Felicien's. For people like Twizeyimana Felicien who live with a disability, the law must provide for their rights to be protected and for them to have equitable access to justice.
Amategeko agateganya uburyo bagomba kunganirwa cyangwa se guhabwa ubutabera buboneye.
We just concluded an assessment to see very scientifically to see what are some of the gaps in our legal system and policies as well as regards access to justice and legal aid to people with disability. Some laws need to be changed to make sure that access to justice also takes into account the people with disabilities. And we have made a couple of recommendations. We've shared the recommendations with different institutions. We are still going on to push to make sure that the amendments can be made to the policies that we have, especially to create a favorable legal environment for them to be able to access justice like anyone in London.